In the Classical Qc2 Nimzo-Indian, white wants to play a3, take the bishop pair and build a long-term advantage without doubling their pawns. But it takes time. First the queen moves, then the pawn, then the queen again. So the most principled response for black is to show that white simply doesn't have time for all these queen moves and pawn pushes. And the classic way to challenge that is to strike in the center with either c5 or d5. But that's exactly where the heavy theory begins. And if you don't want to spend hours learning all that, you'll probably prefer something less explored, something white isn't expecting. A simple developing move like knight c6. It avoids the theory battles, gives you a clean setup, and even if white is familiar with it, you are not worse. When I was young, I'd stumble on a position where a grandmaster played knight c6, and every single time I'd laugh it off. It blocks the c-pawn, case closed. 25 years later, I finally understood. That wrong move wasn't wrong at all. It was a brilliant shortcut I was too stubborn to appreciate. By playing knight c6, black immediately challenges white's queen on c2 by attacking the d4 pawn. White wouldn't want to play e3 because that would block the dark square bishop, so knight f3 is the most logical answer. Now black plays d6, preparing e5, forming what's known as the Zurich center. If you enjoy having the center closed, you'll feel right at home here. Usually you get this classic structure c7, d6, e5 against e4, d5, c4. From there, black has options. Push f5 and f4, or go for the slow knight tour e7, g6, f4, sometimes f6, h5, f4. The plan is simple. Black attacks on the king side, white plays for b4 and c5. And honestly, once you understand this, you're almost done studying the line. Now, someone might ask, if we want the Zurich center, why not just play d6 and develop the knight to d7? That way you avoid getting hit by the d5 push. But here's the problem. Just like in the King's Indian main line, knight c6 is the move that actually pressures d4. It provokes white to push d5 and close the center. If you skip knight c6, there's no pressure, white won't commit to d5, and you won't get the structure you're aiming for. Now let's get back to the move d6, when we see white at a crossroads. They might want to develop the bishop to g5 before playing e3. But there is a trap. h6, bishop h4, and then g5. When the bishop retreats, g4 kicks the knight, and the d4 pawn is gone. Just pay attention to this little detail. If only black castled instead of playing d6, this wouldn't work. Because after knight takes d4, queen d2, c5, queen takes h6, knight c2 check, king d1, and knight takes a1, there is bishop e5, and white is winning. So the lesson is simple. Don't castle before playing d6. Now, since bishop g5 doesn't work in the d6 line, white might try something simple as a3, going after the bishop pair. Black takes, and may follow up with a5, stopping b4, and trying to lock the entire queen side with a4. But there is also a thematic pawn sacrifice you really need to see. It appears when black castles instead, and immediately strikes with e5. After the captures, black plays rook e8, and white's queen retreats to b2. Now Palliser in his book Tango recommends the sharp knight g4 here, but I actually prefer something cleaner and much more intuitive to play. Bishop e6, knight e4, queen g5, rook a d8, and queen g6, because knight g5 is coming. And if white gets greedy with bishop takes b7, it collapses immediately with bishop c4 and c6, threatening to trap the bishop and fork on f3. Now you don't need to memorize any of this. Just remember the idea. We give the pawn, the queen gets exposed, and our pieces explode into the game. And this same logic works in slightly different positions too. If white goes for g3, the queen doesn't even have b2 square to hide. After knight e4, queen f3, and queen d4, Black's activity basically speaks for itself. I added the game Michels Bartel in the description. Take a look if you want to see how Black's quick development completely tore White's position apart. Now, what else can White try? Surprisingly, the best move here is Bishop d2. We castle, they play a3, we take, and this time the bishop recaptures. Now, you might wonder, why all this fuss with Bishop d2 and Bishop takes c3? Isn't a3 followed by Queen takes c3 more natural? And if Black goes for this pawn sack idea we just saw, can't White just ignore it? Well, here is the subtle point. After a3 and Queen takes c3, the c1 bishop stays home, and that means the rook cannot get to d1 in time. And that matters. Because in the line where the bishop recaptures on c3, after rook e8 and rook d1, we have to move our queen to e7 to prepare e5. And you might think, okay, but why does the queen on e7 matter? Well, once we go e5 and White answers with d5, our knight cannot drop back to e7 anymore. The queen is sitting there. It has to circle back via b8, which is a bit clumsy. In Friedman Lamy, after bishop e2 and knight bd7, Black still managed to reroute the knight via f8 and g6. It just takes a few extra moves. So now you see why White prefers bishop d2 and bishop takes c3. It lets the rook reach d1 quickly, and that tiny detail ends up influencing our knight's path later on. Now let's jump back to the moment where White plays bishop d2. We quickly assume the right move for Black is to castle, but you could also try an immediate e5. If d5, we get to play knight e7 and knight g6 without rerouting back to b8 first. And that's a nice little positional trick. However, playing knight e7 immediately would be a huge blunder because queen a4 hits us, and we are basically done. So the correct move order is first bishop takes c3 and only then knight e7 heading toward g6. Another way White can deal with this setup is by playing a3 first. After we take on c3 and they recapture, it's not in our favor to open the center, because White has the bishop here. You play queen e7, and now White is happy to push d5, sending our knight back home. The main line for Black is to just castle, and after the exchanges on c3 to follow up with either rook e8 or queen e7. If you try to trick White with rook e8, aiming for e5 with an idea to have the e7 square open for your knight after they advance d5, they'll play rook d1 and, thanks to the pin, force queen e7 anyway. Whether it's worth involving rook e8 and rook d1 is a subtle question, one we won't dive into here. You can explore it yourself to see what's more beneficial, but for now we'll go straight for queen e7. Now, White has plenty of options, but I'll go through the one that feels most logical to me. e4, grabbing the center while preparing to develop the bishop and castle. Black continues with e5. White goes d5 and our knight drops back to b8. This is the least favorable scenario. We lose a couple of moves just to get our knight back into play. But even this version is perfectly fine for Black. And the best part is that you don't need to know any book moves from this point. It's all about feeling the center, understanding the pawn structure, and activating your pieces. The main move for White is bishop e2, and Black can immediately start a kingside initiative with knight h5. Well, some of you might worry about knight takes e5, hitting h5 knight. But check this out, knight f4 hits both g2 and e5. If White just castles instead, then after knight f4, c5, f5, Black is already rolling with a strong attack. Palliser shows what happens if White castles long. Black plays the same knight f4 move, and now if g3, knight takes e2, queen takes e2, the knight heads to c5, followed by either f5 or c6, or even both, grabbing full control of the light squares, because there is no light square bishop anymore. Now some of you might check this with an engine and think, Black is worse. That's okay, you can trust the engine. Or you can try this in blitz or rapid games and see how easy it is to find your next move while your opponent sweats expecting f5 or c6 at any moment. And honestly, it doesn't matter whether you play knight h5, bishop g4, a5 or knight e8. The plan is the same. Once you understand the center and the pawn structure, it's really hard to go wrong with black. Now here's a little sneaky idea for white early in this line. We said bishop d2 is best, and bishop g5 can lose the d-pawn. But what if white starts with bishop g5, we hit it with h6, and then they cheekily retreat to d2? Suddenly they're playing the same moves as before, except now our pawn is sitting on h6 instead of on h7. If white castles long, that little pawn can become a real troublemaker, a traitor. It acts like a hook, helping white's pawns open files quickly against our king. Now, it probably won't come up in a club game, but it's still a clever trick worth knowing. And no need to panic even if your opponent goes for this. That small boost in their attack is actually a hint. They're likely heading for a long castling, so you can start prepping your counter on that side. Overall, if you prefer ideas over memorization, enjoy close center, and love positional play, the Zurich variation is a great choice for your repertoire.